Director for the Energy Division at the Washington State Department of Commerce, and Michael has been leading the team to develop the Washington State Energy Strategy. Michael, do you want to say a few words?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I just want to thank everybody for being here. I think Hendrik did a great job describing where we are, where we've been, and where we would like to go over the next few years. And I really genuinely appreciate everyone's interest today in being here to help comment on and shape the 2021 State Energy Strategy as we finalize it. So thank you for being here.
Great, thank you, Michael. And I should say that Michael's joined by a couple of his colleagues with the Washington State Department of Commerce who played an integral role in the development of the energy strategy, Glenn Blackman and Kate Kelly. We also have Reeves Clippard, who along with Nancy Hirsch was one of the co-chairs of an advisory committee that worked throughout the year to advise on the development of the energy strategy. And I think several members of the advisory committee are also listening in to the hearing today. Reeves, would you like to say a few words about the advisory committee?
Yes, absolutely. First and foremost, I want to echo the gratitude that Michael shared. The state team, the technical team, the facilitation team have all worked very hard to just do a tremendous amount of research, synthesizing that information, receiving feedback and outreach, as well as the advisory committee in similar capacities. And I think the state energy strategy really reflects the amount of hard work and information that has gone into making such a transformational strategy. I do want to thank those who are at the hearing today to provide their own feedback. This strategy is created to support and in service of the people of Washington and the greater communities that we operate in. And I know the team takes your feedback very seriously. So thank you everybody for their time and for participating. The strategy is better for it.
Great, thank you, Reeves. And I should say my name is Tom Byerly. I'm with Ross Strategic. I'll be facilitating the public hearing today, and we were assisting over the course of the year with the work of the advisory committee. I'm going to say just a little bit more about the hearing format today to give folks a sense of the meeting and the flow. And then we're going to spend about 15 minutes or so with a background video about the Washington State Energy Strategy itself that gives an overview of the components of the strategy. Following that, we'll go into public comment time, and we'll say a little bit about effectively participating today via Zoom, and then we will go through public comments. We have a list of people who signed up ahead of time. We will start with that, and if there are folks who haven't signed up, we'll ask for additional statements once we go through the list of people who have signed up. We'll go as long as it takes this afternoon for those who are on right now, and then we'll resume at 6:00 p.m. tonight and go through some of the background again for people who are joining in the evening to be able to enable folks to join this evening who might not have been able to participate this afternoon. So a little bit about the format of today. So we invite those who are participating to be able to jump in and make 3-minute statements related to the energy strategy. As I said earlier, we'll begin with the people who signed up prior to the hearing, and we'll just go in the order that people signed up in. But we want to make sure that others who haven't signed up who'd like to make a statement have the opportunity to do that. So once we get through the list of signups, I'll ask folks to raise your hand to make a statement if you would like to do that. The hearing's being recorded, and it'll be posted to the Washington State Energy Strategy website. It's also being streamed on the Department of Commerce YouTube channel. So we welcome those who are observing in that way today. Either in addition to or instead of public statements that people might want to make verbally today, we invite people to submit written comments to energystrategy@commerce.wa.gov, and we're inviting those through the end of this week. So by Friday, December 11th, if you'd like to submit a written comment or a written version of the statement that you make today, please do so, and the email address is on your screen. All the information associated with contacts, address, phone number, email, etc., will become part of the public record. So please just recognize that. All right. So what we'd like to do is just give an overview of the state energy strategy. What we have here is approximately a 15-minute video or so that Michael Furze and Glenn Blackman recorded based on an earlier briefing. And the earlier briefing was for the Washington State Legislature, the Senate Committee on Environment, Energy, and Technology. So you'll see some references to that during the video. So don't be surprised when you hear references to the committee. There's also a few allusions in there to additional presentations that were part of that that event. But the video is about 15 minutes or so, and we'll move into that right now.
Good morning. Thank you. My name is Michael Furze, and I'm an assistant director at the Department of Commerce. The team that I lead is our energy division, and Glenn Blackman, who's leader for the policy office, is with me here today. Chair Carlisle, committee members, thank you so much for this opportunity to talk about the soon to be completed 2021 state energy strategy. Next slide, please. As you know, Commerce has got a diverse portfolio, and that is something that enables us to partner effectively with communities across the state. Our work spans from affordable housing to supporting international trade. Under Director Brown's leadership, we've played a key role in response to the pandemic, distributing over $800 million in CARES Act funding to get it out to needed activities across the state. And all this puts us in a unique position to partner with different communities to help achieve the state's clean energy future. Next slide, please. So in 2019, the legislature asked us to develop a new state energy strategy as part of CETA, the Clean Energy Transformation Act that was passed in 2019. And there were two key elements as part of the work that we need to do for the state energy strategy. The first is to meet the requirements of CETA as it relates to clean electricity. And the second is to meet the state greenhouse gas emissions targets. And the good news is that we can do it. We need to rethink how we use energy in all aspects of our economy, and we need to hustle, but we can do it. The change is one that's akin to a fundamental shift in how we use energy, and it's one that can be hard to imagine. And so for me, I like to think back and look at similar shifts that I can understand in my lifetime, from textbook to e-reader, from landline to smartphone. And then given the breadth of your committee, Mr. Chair, think about the internet, which 30 years ago was being deployed outside of the Defense Department for the first time, and it's now bringing us together safely in the pandemic on platforms like Zoom. So that's the type of shift that we are thinking through when it comes to the state energy strategy. Next slide, please. And we can do it while considering these cross-cutting realities of Washington's clean energy economy, the need for fair prices, for sufficient supply of electricity and energy, for workforce development needs. We also need to think differently about how we address the needs of low-income and vulnerable populations in ways that we have not done before. And we need to do that while accounting for and responding to the differences between the urban and rural communities in our state. Next slide. We can achieve the goals that you laid out for us in the state energy strategy thanks to the composition of our state energy strategy advisory committee, which was expanded since the last time we did this over a decade ago. And I want to provide some special thanks to two members of your committee who brought your expertise and perspective to help shape our strategy, Senator Sheldon and Chair Carlisle. It's a lot of work to develop a state energy strategy. Thank you for your time and your energy. I'm going to turn it over to Glenn on the next slide, and he's going to talk about the approach that Commerce has taken to the state energy strategy.
Thank you, Michael. And so I'm going to briefly go over the framework for the energy strategy analysis itself. Next slide, please. This illustrates kind of the energy flows within our economy today. On the left, you see the different forms of energy that are used in the state, and the size of the box corresponds to how much of that form of energy that we use. You see petroleum is the largest and natural gas is the second largest. And then those two, along with coal, are the primary sources of our greenhouse gas emissions. The strategy is organized around the pink boxes over on the right-hand side. Those are the end-use sectors, the different activities where we use energy. And you can see over there that transportation is our biggest energy use in the state. And if you look at this on a carbon emissions basis, it's even more predominant because basically no renewable energy today is being used for transportation, very little. And then in addition to these four end-use areas, we look at electricity generation, which is the goldenrod box toward the top. So those are the kind of the way the energy strategy is organized. Next slide, please. And then the targets that we're trying to meet are illustrated with the red dots in this chart over time. You see the 2020 level that we're at today, which is kind of our starting point. And then under the statutory emissions reduction limits, we need to achieve a 45% reduction by 2030, and then essentially reach a net zero emissions level by 2050. The bar chart on the left shows where the emissions are in terms of the sectors. You see electricity at the top, where CETA is already putting us on a track to eliminate those emissions over time. And then transportation becomes even more prominent in terms of where we need to do our work. The darker blue section at the bottom of that chart represents non-energy uses or emissions in the economy. Those are not addressed in the energy strategy, and they represent an area where we have to drive energy-related emissions even further because of the existence of those non-energy emissions. Next slide, please. We analyzed this problem using a deep decarbonization pathway framework. This is an analytical method that we've used in the state before. You've seen a number of presentations from different groups over the years using this framework, where you try to reach a certain outcome, such as an emissions reduction level, by looking across every conceivable use of energy within the state and the technologies that are available and the costs of those technologies, and try to find the path through there that meets your objectives. By far, the primary objective in any one of these is to meet those emissions reductions and to find the least cost method of doing that. I won't go through all these different scenarios, but you do see that we look at it with different alternatives in mind that have a different emphasis on different paths toward that future. And you see that here that in any of the scenarios that we look at, over time we need to use more electricity in our grid. That turns out to be a really fundamental conclusion of the strategy. Next slide, please. In addition to that energy modeling that I just described, we also were able to do some economic modeling to look at the likely effect of this strategy on the state's economy and workforce. And we consulted with a great number of technical experts beyond those in on the advisory committee itself during this process. So that's a kind of an overview of the analytical framework itself. And now we're going to talk about some of the key strategies that are in the current draft. Next slide, please.
Thank you. So one of the central focus efforts that we had in the state energy strategy was thinking about how we can do this equitably. Equity played a much larger role than in past strategies. And part of that is due to the fact that the Environmental Justice Task Force work that you'll be hearing about directly after us was going on both before and simultaneously to the strategy process. And so we were able to learn a lot and borrow from the work there around community engagement and community mapping to help think through different ways to make the transition to the clean energy future in Washington more equitable. In addition to that, thinking through how we can support workers through this transition and sort of process elements for how we can work with different stakeholders to work through the details of implementing the ideas that are in the state energy strategy. All of that came from work that we shared with our colleagues at the Environmental Justice Task Force. In addition to that, maybe not entirely surprising given the way that we're communicating today, but the need for universal broadband access came through as a clear equity marker in our state energy strategy, both in terms of connecting people and connecting the type of technology that we will need to build out over the next 30 years. And I know that you'll hear more today from our colleague, Russ Elliott. Next slide, please.
In the electricity sector, it's become very important in this work that we strengthen and expand the electricity sector that we have. It plays a much larger role in our energy system in the future. It's a way that we can take renewable and non-emitting energy and use it in applications where today we need gasoline or natural gas, fossil fuels in some form other than electricity. So to do that, we need to add renewable generation, and we need to expand and strengthen the transmission system so that we can draw resources from a much broader area than just the state of Washington. The electric grid needs to be more flexible so that we can adjust our energy consumption, our loads, rather than having to turn on and turn off fossil fuel plants the way we manage the grid today. We need to make more use of market mechanisms so that we can get clean power at the lowest possible cost. And through all of this, we need to protect and enhance resource adequacy, which is one of the fundamental tenets of CETA. Next slide, please.
So Glenn alluded to the type of transformation that's going to happen in our transportation sector when he showed the diagram earlier in our presentation. I think that he said that right now there's not a lot of renewable energy that's being used in the transportation sector, and we think that's going to change quite a bit over the next 30 years. And in fact, there's a lot of work to do in the next 10 years to achieve the emissions targets that the state has. We're going to need to move people and goods more efficiently. And in order to get there, we're probably going to need to set targets and establish accountability mechanisms in order to move forward. Next slide, please.
The building sector includes our homes and our businesses, office buildings, anything that's not, like a factory, but it's where we use energy for heat, lighting, water heating, things like that. And the key message for the building sector is heat pumps. High efficiency heat pumps are a technology that has made just tremendous progress over the years and is ready for deployment in many different applications, whether it's heating water or heating the space in a building. And so, of course, those would use electricity and use it at much higher efficiency levels than what we would use to natural gas today in a furnace or a water heater. We also need to develop standards for new buildings and for existing buildings. And then we need to make the investments in the existing stock of buildings in order to remove the CO2 emissions from those buildings through efficiency and conversion to non-emitting energy forms. Next slide, please.
And in the industrial sector, I think the opportunity is to achieve Washington's potential as a global leader in the clean energy economy. It gives us the opportunity to build on part of the array of industries in our state. And each industry that we have may require their own kind of appropriate pathway to participate in the clean energy future. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And we think the next step there is thinking about improving the data and analytical capabilities that we have as a state that will enable us to fine-tune a clean energy industrial policy. Next slide.
And one more, please.
So the work of the strategy is not over. Our final public hearing is next Monday, December 7th. And from there, when the strategy is finalized and transmitted by the end of the year, then a different set of work begins to kind of identify and prioritize near-term actions that will help move us forward to the 2030 outcomes that we have in statute. We need to figure out kind of the roles and responsibilities and how to distribute the work amongst the participants. And we need to include communities in that in a way that we have done differently in getting the frontline perspective from vulnerable populations about how we should implement some of the ideas that are part of the state energy strategy and how they can benefit from those ideas. And we need to do this while recognizing the limitations that we have within the pandemic. And with that, more work will begin in 2021. Thank you for the opportunity to give you a high-level overview of the state energy strategy.
All right. What we'd like to do now is hear from all of you, based on what you have just heard about the state energy strategy. So a couple of things about the public comment process. Number one is that those who are joined in are muted unless speaking. But when we call on you, we'll allow you to be unmuted by the host to ask for comments. And we'll have the option to share your video. It's up to you whether you want to share your video or not. You'll have those options, and I'll show you that in just a minute. If you are having any technical issues, please feel free to use chat. That'll come to the host and the panelists, and we can be able to help you with any technical problems that you have. And again, if you haven't signed up ahead of time, that's fine. We'll ask for hands at the end for folks after we get through the list of those who've signed up ahead of time, for anybody else that wants to make a statement. And I'll do my best to let people know who is next in line to speak. If you have questions about where you are in the queue in order to be able to manage your own time, feel free to chat those in, and colleagues can let you know. A couple of guidelines for the comments. We will keep these to 3 minutes apiece. I'll let you know when we get close to that time. We'd like people to begin by introducing yourself with your name and with your affiliation. We'd like you to frame your comments as statements rather than as questions to the extent possible. And please refrain from any disrespectful or attacking language, which isn't appropriate for this venue. And we'll ask just one verbal comment per person. As I said earlier in the presentation, there's a email address to which you could send written comments if you would prefer to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and just talk a little bit about the process for making comments when you're called on, and give a sense of some version of what you'll be seeing on your screen. There's a menu of options at the bottom of the screen. One of those is the option to raise your hand. So if at an appropriate time, if you'd like to make a statement towards the end after we go through the list, you can raise your hand. I may also ask folks, if I say your name and I'm not identifying you quickly, if you could raise your hand, that would help us manage behind the scenes the Zoom to make sure that we can find you and bring you into the conversation. If you are participating by phone, you can use the *9 function to raise your hand. We will see that as well. And again, if you have any technical assistance needs or have any questions about where you are in the queue, feel free to chat those into us using the control panel at the bottom of the screen. When you're asked to speak, there'll be a moment here where you'll transition from your screen, and you'll get a little sign saying that you're rejoining. And what that does is it puts you into a place in Zoom where you're able to mute and unmute yourself and start your video if you so choose. So just expect a little bit of a delay there as we bring you in. If it turns out that this technology becomes troublesome, what we might do is just not do video, and we might just mute and unmute folks. So bear with us if that turns out to be the case. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen here, and we'll start the public comment process. And what I'd like to do is to be able to start. The first three commenters that we have are Kyle Englund, Alan Spector, and Helen Walter Terranoni. So Kyle, we will begin with you. And Kyle, what I'll do is you're gonna be our trial run here. We'll bring you into the conversation. There'll be just a brief pause, and then what I'll do is ask you to unmute yourself and go on video if you choose, and then make your statement. Kyle, looks like you're with us, and I think we can hear you.
Okay, can you hear
Go
me?
ahead. We can, thank you.
Very good. I like being the guinea pig today. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kyle Englund. I'm the Director of Human Resources and External Affairs for Kaiser Aluminum. We operate a couple plants out here in Spokane Valley. First and foremost, I'd just really like to say thank you for the opportunity to provide comments today. This is an important process for us, and to be able to share our thoughts on the Department of Commerce 2021 State Energy Strategy is pretty important. So if you're not aware, Kaiser Aluminum is an integral part of Washington State's aerospace supply chain. Our facility produces aluminum aerospace plate and sheet products, which are used to manufacture and lightweight aircraft. More specifically, our products help reduce the consumption of fuel in the transportation sector and reduce global greenhouse gas emissions. Since 2010, Kaiser has completed numerous facility improvements and investments which utilize natural gas more efficiently. These investments have lowered the carbon intensity of our products and allowed us to remain competitive in the marketplace. The state's energy policy needs to acknowledge that not all manufacturing processes can be electrified at this time, and that there is no one size fits all decarbonization option. The policy needs to allow for industry-specific strategies. Kaiser cannot currently manufacture these important products without the use of natural gas because current alternative technologies such as electricity and hydrogen are not capable of remelting aluminum on the manufacturing scale required at our facilities. The state's energy policy should encourage, not discourage, responsible manufacturing growth. When manufacturing facilities invest in their plants, modern and efficient equipment is installed, resulting in improved energy and process efficiency. The result is lower greenhouse gas emissions per unit of production, or what we call carbon content. The policy should not create any uncertainty regarding the availability of raw materials, and this includes natural gas, because that would discourage the completion of these types of projects. As an energy-intensive and trade-exposed manufacturer, Kaiser faces a unique set of challenges. Trade exposure means that both international and domestic competitors offering the same products could gain market share if the state's EITEs, or energy-intensive trade-exposed entities, become less competitive due to operational disruptions or investment uncertainties. Losing market share to international and domestic competitors would result in the unintended consequences of these products being manufactured outside the state of Washington by less carbon efficient competitors. This would lead to higher carbon intensity for products that could and should be made here in Washington, as well as increasing global greenhouse gases. In summary, through $390 million of capital investments since 2005, Kaiser is currently a highly competitive and highly efficient manufacturer of products that are both 100% recyclable and essential to reducing global greenhouse gases. To remain competitive going forward, we plan to continue to invest in operational efficiencies and control technologies, allowing us to continue to manufacture our products with lower carbon intensity than our domestic and international competitors. Without the availability of natural gas, Kaiser would be made significantly less competitive. Leakage of our jobs, products, and emissions would occur. So I'd like to say thank you again for this opportunity to share our thoughts on this strategic strategy. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Kyle. All right, let's see, next up we have Alan Spector, and Alan will be followed by Helen Walter Terranoni and then Don Stinky. Hi, Alan, if you go ahead and unmute yourself, we'll be able to hear you.
All right. I'm Alan Spector, Energy Efficiency Policy Manager for Cascade Natural Gas. We serve just under 300,000 customers across Washington and Oregon. And first off, we really appreciate the opportunity to provide comment today regarding the draft 2021 State Energy Strategy. As a little bit of background, Cascade's offered robust energy efficiency efforts for over a decade in Washington. In that time, in partnership with our customers, we've saved over 4 million therms in homes and businesses across Washington state. Our energy efficiency team actively identifies and incorporates deep and sustainable energy efficiency efforts, and we have board representation on NEA's Natural Gas Market Transformation Group. So we believe it takes all of us coming together to lower our carbon footprint and combat climate change, and it's equally important to maintain grid reliability, affordability, and resilience. An inclusive approach to decarbonization leads to innovation as utilities like Cascade work to meet the needs of lower income and rural populations, commercial customers, and the industrial sector. To this end, I want to say that we appreciate in its second draft, the Department of Commerce acknowledging that there is an opportunity for natural gas utilities to demonstrate our long-term role in a clean energy future through actions we take today, such as continuing to make robust gains in energy efficiency, the use of renewable gas and research into similar cutting-edge technologies, and support of solar-paired thermal options and other zero emissions technologies. Cascade is very interested in finding opportunities to pursue these pathways and is actively exploring RNG opportunities while also working hard to achieve a fuller assessment of the energy burden experienced across the communities we serve. We believe this information will provide greater insights that could further inform statewide energy strategy as it pertains to small cities and rural populations. We believe net zero energy technology paired with strategic maximization of biogas potential will allow for maintained flexibility and energy choice. Such pathways will help ensure a safe and healthy environment for future generations. Cascade appreciates the opportunity to comment and looks forward to our industry continuing to serve Washington customers safely and reliably while innovating to ensure a place in the state's energy future. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. All right, next up we will have Helen Walter Terranoni, and Helen will be followed by Don Stinky and then Brian Grunkmeyer. Hi, Helen, you should be okay if you unmute.
Okay, great. Now I can. Great. Thank you so much. And you got my name right too, so that's quite astonishing. So thank you for allowing me to comment. My name is Helen Walter Terranoni. I'm the Vice President of Regulatory Affairs at the Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration Institute, which is this trade association representing manufacturers of heating, cooling, water heating, and commercial refrigeration equipment, more than 300 members strong. We advocate for for industry and develop standards for and certify the performance of many products manufactured for our members. HRI and our members stand ready to be a resource to Washington as it begins its transition, and we're very interested in Washington's efforts to help the state transition toward a cleaner energy economy by building an equitable and inclusive clean economy, achieving greenhouse gas emission limitations and limits using energy more efficiently, reducing energy consumption, and promoting clean industries. And to that, we'd like to commend you for a couple of things and have some suggestions. We greatly appreciate the leadership role that Washington has taken in the public sector as leading by example. And we're very happy to ensure the goals are incentivized change within the private sector. To this end, we did review the state energy strategy and have some recommendations for Washington State. We'd like to request that Washington continue to conduct emissions and cost savings analyses consistent with the full spectrum of product efficiencies. Deep carbonization modeling requires exploration into scenarios where Washington can achieve its goals through decarbonization. To enhance this research, we strongly support a Washington study of potentially affected HVAC and water heating products to better understand the distribution of fuels and equipment used within the state, allowing Washington to create more effective policies to help achieve goals in the instances where there are cost-effective market-based drivers for consumers to switch to new or more appropriate technologies. Secondly, we recommend that Washington implement an incentive program to encourage the adoption of high energy efficiency appliances and update its study of market efficiency to include a market shift anticipated by programs that incentivize improved energy efficiency equipment. Thirdly, we recommend that Washington establish a baseline distribution of fuels and furnace heat pump and other equipment used within the state. To better understand the baseline market will be critical in analyzing the efficacy of any policies. With this understanding, Washington will also be able to share how its market transformation can occur. For example, based on our analysis of the US heat pump market, Washington likely contains approximately 2.6% of all the heat pumps installed in the US. We look forward to sharing our data and resources with Washington to ensure this robust analysis is completed. Next, we recommend that Washington shift building codes to performance-based requirements and track building energy usage. We encourage the adoption of building codes that incorporate performance-based requirements instead of prescriptive technology-based restrictions. Performance-based building code requirements can be used to ensure that all buildings are compliant with Washington's energy and environmental goals while allowing building owners the flexibility needed to meet the unique demands. I'll quickly
Helen,
wrap up.
you're close to time. Yeah, if you want to wrap up quickly, that'd be great. Thanks.
I was timing myself. We also want to make sure that any changes in Washington are equitable and reliable for all residents. Especially, there's many, of course, in Washington State, many folks that live remotely and need access to reliable power, and also for low-income housing. We also recommend Washington continue to open all research and recommendations to stakeholder feedback, as you're doing now, in the further study of the short and long-term consequences of policy options. Finally, we do recommend that Washington adopt the latest version of ASHRAE 90.1 or its equivalent into Washington building codes and expand the focus of HVAC total system performance ratio without prohibiting equipment types supporting the most cost-effective and energy-efficient equipment. Thank you very much for your time, and we'd be happy to continue this dialogue offline.
Great. Thank you, Helen. All right. Next up, we've got Dawn Stenke, and following Dawn, we have Brian Grunkmeyer and then Todd Myers. Let's see, Don, you can go ahead if you just need to unmute yourself.
Well, I'm Don Steinke, and when I signed up, I signed up for both Alona and me. Will you call on her later, or should she follow me?
Yeah, so why don't we call on Alona later as well? Thanks, Don.
Later means after me or later on?
Why don't we do, I'll tell you what, why don't we do sequentially? If Alona is there with you, Don, why don't we do you first and then Alona?
She is, yes.
Okay.
So hello, I'm Don Steinke, a retired physics teacher in Vancouver. Thank you all for the impressive work you've done on this. I urge you to give strong emphasis to your highest priorities in the executive summary. Consider beginning your executive summary by declaring that climate change is already hurting our economy and it will get worse. The good news is that we know what's causing it and know what we can do about it. Recognize that methane gas is nearly as bad as coal, and LNG could be worse than coal in terms of climate. To delay action now will lead to higher costs associated with climate damage and the cost of carbon capture. Billions of dollars have already been wasted on carbon capture schemes, which failed to capture carbon, and if they ever succeed, it's likely to be much more expensive than emissions reduction. The steps to reducing the harms of climate change are to stop making the problem worse, such as by allowing capital to be invested in stuff that will lead to more greenhouse gas emissions, such as gas furnaces, gas boilers, water heaters, and gasoline-powered vehicles and lawnmowers, forklifts, and boats. Stop capital investments in new hydrocarbon fueling stations. 2, maximize efficiency. 3, electrify everything if possible and mitigate the rest. 4, do everything possible to avoid war. That's not your department, but 5, fix racial inequities, promote equity early, save and plant trees, reduce the need for travel, establish specific targets for electric vehicle sales, vehicle miles traveled, and transportation emissions, with accountability measures for meeting those targets. Last spring, the California Air Resources Board declared that by 2035, 55% of all trucks be electric and to get started by 2024. About the same time, I read that Governors Kate Brown and Jay Inslee agreed to seek similar policies here, and I urge you to support that. Also about that time, SoCal Edison announced plans to spend $350 million for truck charging stations. We need to get on board. Recognize that according to the International Energy Agency, the cost of renewable energy now is already lower than what they forecast last year for 2040. Support solar. Thanks for giving us this opportunity to speak. And here's my wife, Alona.
Thank you, Don. Go ahead, Alona.
Hello, my name is Alona Steinke. I'm a retired RN from Vancouver. It is urgent that we achieve a clean energy economy. Washington needs to act now across all state agencies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions on a scale that will allow us to meet our goals. I'm glad that this draft strategy is addressing our climate emergency and the need to invest in an economy that is clean, efficient, and equitable. In regards to reducing greenhouse gases in industry, I suggest that marine, trucking, and rail industries should be electrified as soon as possible. Shore power should be required for ships. This isn't too much to ask, as it's already happening in some places with electric ferries and dredgers, and BNSF is even developing 2 battery-powered locomotives. Public transit and ride-hailing services as well need to be electrified. Transportation is responsible for 45% of our state's health-harming and planet-warming pollution. We have to reduce these emissions as quickly as possible. Regarding carbon capture, reuse, and storage, please see that polluters pay for the research, development, and the implementation of this, all the while assuring that our precious wilderness areas remain unharmed. I ask that you support the beneficial electrification bill introduced by Representative Alex Rammel. This would allow PUDs to provide incentives for fuel switching. People who want to switch from gas heat and gas appliances to electric should be entitled to incentives. This is a matter of health and safety, not one of competition. A new study by UCLA's Fielding School of Public Health has found that gas appliances emit pollutants, including carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, fine particulate matter, and formaldehyde. The researchers found that after cooking with a gas stove and oven for 1 hour, the levels of nitrogen dioxide inside the kitchen are so high that they exceed both the state and the national outdoor acute air quality standards in more than 90% of the homes. Breathing nitrogen dioxide is very dangerous, especially for children and others such as the elderly who are more susceptible to lung disease. A 2013 study found that children who grow up in a home with a gas stove are 42% more likely to develop asthma than those who do not. A recent news story in Portland recommended that if one had to use a gas stove, to be sure to turn on the fan and open a window in the kitchen. We are running out of time. Please make these rules as strong as possible. And thank you for all your work.
Thank you, Alona, and thank you, Dawn. And I'm seeing how you signed up, so I appreciate you explaining that to me at the outset. All righty. Let's see. So we have next up Brian Grunkmeyer, and then Brian will be followed by Todd Myers, and then Leanne Guyer. Let's see. And Brian, I'm not seeing your name here. If you are with us, if you raise your hand, I'll be able to see that. And while we do that, maybe what we'll do is go to Todd Myers, and then Brian, if you're with us and raise your hand, we'll bring you in. Let's see. So Todd Myers, you are up next.
Good afternoon. So thank you for having me. I'm Todd Myers. I'm with the Washington Policy Center. I just have some, my comments are more of an overview of the direction I think that this needs to take. The first thing I think is that this policy or this strategy doesn't do something fundamental, which is admit that we have missed all of our targets. We are very likely to miss our 2020 targets, as we have in Washington State for the previous targets. And unless we recognize the reasons for that failure, we're going to continue to fail. The reason we're missing is because most of our strategies focused on a wide range of political goals and don't set clear targets and stick to those targets and accountability. So along those lines, I think the approach of this strategy is more than a decade outdated. McKinsey set the standard for how you create an energy strategy more than a decade ago by doing what is called the McKinsey curves, which is prioritizing strategies for CO2 reduction based on effectiveness. In other words, how much does it cost to reduce 1 metric ton of CO2? The reason that we have failed in Washington State is that we have chosen policies that have very high costs, but do very little to reduce CO2 emissions. The lack of such a standard in this energy strategy means that we are very likely to continue the failure that we have seen in the past, because strategies are based more on a wide range of political goals than clear targets. Transportation in this strategy, I think, is a case in point. There are 2 strategies that are recommended: the low carbon fuel standard and subsidies for electric vehicles. Both are expensive and both are poor strategies for meeting the equity goals. So for example, the low carbon fuel standard, based on California's experience, which has had it longer than anyone else, currently costs $200 per metric ton. That is 20 times as expensive as other strategies, and strategies that I personally use when I invest in CO2 reduction projects to offset my CO2 consumption and emissions. Second, most of the strategies in an LCFS go to the wealthiest residents. An analysis of California's investments show that virtually all of the support goes to electric vehicle charging stations in wealthy communities, which means also virtually all of the air quality improvements go to the wealthy. So without standards to look at how policies are effectively reducing CO2 emissions, you're likely to get more strategies like a low carbon fuel standard. You see a very similar thing with electric vehicle subsidies, which go mostly to the wealthy. So the question is, what should we do? And I think 3 things. First, radically reduce the number of goals in the strategy. The goals in the strategy include a wide range of things that have nothing to do with CO2 reduction. For example, I note that broadband is mentioned as a critical strategy, but I can find nothing either in the strategy or the modeling that actually measures the impact of broadband on CO2 reduction. There is an indication that it might help to reduce vehicle miles traveled or other things, but nowhere does it say how much or what the cost would be as opposed to alternatives.
Todd, we're at time, so I'm wondering if you could work to wrap things up.
Give me 15 seconds.
All righty, thanks.
Second, require all strategies be reduced on a cost per metric ton basis, as McKinsey does, to make sure that we are getting the most effective. And finally, put people, not planners, in charge. Planners simply, as the best that they can do, they simply cannot keep up with market changes, as we have seen with the aluminum industry in Washington State. Do those three things, and I think we are more likely to effectively reduce CO2 emissions and reduce the risks of climate change in the future. Thanks for letting me go a little bit over time.
Great. Thank you, Todd. All right. Let's see. Next up, we have Leanne Guyer, and then Leanne will be followed by Claire Richards and Mark Fossler. Hi, Leanne.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to provide comment on the Washington State Energy Strategy Plan. My name is Leanne Guyer. I am a journeyman pipe fitter and a 23-year member of the United Association of Plumbers and Pipe Fitters, Local 32. I also work on legislative issues for Washington State Association of Plumbers and Pipe Fitters, representing approximately 9,000 members in Washington State. We recognize the need for climate action and believe that it should be done in a manner that creates the maximum benefit to every sector impacted. A balanced approach is essential to ensure that lawmakers undertaking these monumental changes to our society and economy do not lead to avoidable harm to working families and our state's economy. An opportunity exists to create more family wage jobs and design an environmentally driven economic engine that will bring shared prosperity to all of Washington. But to fail in our approach could bring great harm to our state and our members at a volatile time in our history. One sector that greatly impacts our membership is the natural gas industry, and it must be recognized that natural gas is an essential part of our clean energy future. We believe a balanced energy system that includes a mix of clean energy sources like solar, wind, hydro, natural gas, and renewable natural gas to generate a workable energy infrastructure. We believe that the underlying focus on electrification made in the energy strategy does not represent a balanced approach that will allow the flexibility needed to adopt policies with the greatest cumulative positive impacts for the state. We appreciate the work done by the Department of Commerce, the consultants, and the advisory committee. As the department continues to think about state energy delivery systems and the impact to working families, as well as the current and future industries, we would like to welcome the opportunity to be included in further discussions and deliberations. It should be noted that the committee did not include any representation from the construction, labor, or constituency that will be drastically affected by any policy following this committee's recommendations. In order to be successful in responsibly transitioning to a clean energy future, the state must be committed to ensuring a balanced approach to policymaking that provides the maximum benefit for the environment without causing undue harm to working families and the businesses that makes our state so prosperous. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Leanne. All right. Let's see. Next up, we have Claire Richards, and then Mark Vossler, and then Nils Johnson. Let's see, Claire, I'm not seeing your name on Zoom right now. If you are with us and want to raise your hand, I will see that. And Claire, we can come back to you if you join in. Let's see, so after Claire, we have Mark Vossler. And Mark, I'm also not seeing your name. So either Claire Richards or Mark Vossler, if you're with us and want to raise your hand, we'll be able to bring you into the conversation. How about Nils Johnson? Nils, I see you, and we'll bring you in. Hi, Nils. I think there you go.
Hey, sorry about that. All right. All right. Sorry about that. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. My name is Nils Johnson. I am the State Government Affairs Manager for Northwest Natural. Northwest Natural, we have a vision of being able to decarbonize our pipeline by 2050. We know that's not fast enough, and we think we can go even faster as technology improves, but our focus every day is how do we decarbonize our pipeline and do so yesterday. And the three main ways we think we're going to get there is one is through energy efficiency. We think that there's a ton of low-hanging fruit still available, and in particular around the industrial sector. The second is through renewable natural gas. So we passed in Oregon one of the most progressive pieces of renewable natural gas legislation in the country in 2019 that allowed us to use ratepayer dollars to purchase renewable natural gas. It was a start, but it's not going to get us entirely where we need to go, but it allows, at least gives us a launching pad. And one of the benefits of renewable natural gas, of course, is that you're pulling methane out of the air and you're able to clean that up and turn that into a renewable substance. And then third is renewable hydrogen. And we believe that there's an enormous potential there, not only for us, but really for our electric utility friends as well, as you can store renewable hydrogen on our pipeline for up to 6 months, which is longer than any battery to market to date. And so in Oregon, we supported both versions of the cap and trade bill. We look forward to working with, and have been and continue to look forward to working with lawmakers here in Washington to hopefully get some version of a cap and trade bill done by the end of the session. So we're very pro climate, like that we need to decarbonize and that we need to do all that stuff today, sort of a company. And we were really excited when Commerce decided to undertake this study and to come up with a state energy strategy. I think that's why we're so disappointed, is that when I read this draft, I mean, there's a lot of assumptions built into that don't seem to be borne out by science and facts, and that there are conclusions that are drawn, particularly around the benefits of electrification, that so far don't seem to bear out in reality. And just as an example, that is, let's say you all of a sudden were to electrify every new building tomorrow. Well, where's that additional energy going to come from for the electrics? Well, there aren't additional renewables online right now, which means that they're going to purchase natural gas, and they're going to have to convert that into electricity, which is a carbon-intensive way to do that. Which actually means that your carbon emissions increase rather than decrease. And so, I guess our hope is that, and plus also, I think one thing that we wish that would have done a better job of is taking into account resource adequacy. As we look at energy planning in the Northwest for the next 5 years, there is some question as to whether we have enough, we have adequate resources already. And so if we're going to increase the electrification load, where's that additional power going to come from? And I guess the third issue is that we were hoping that it would take a more comprehensive look at the energy system as a whole. So I brought up storage a second ago, and the reason why is when we told the electric companies to decarbonize, we didn't say cut the wires, we just said put a cleaner substance on your wires. And the same thing is true for the gas companies. And one of the benefits is you've got, to compare the cost of a lithium ion battery with, say, for instance, our piping network would be worth $2 trillion.
It's about time to wrap up.
Great. Okay. So why not incorporate that into the planning and thinking and say, how can storage help not only the gas companies decarbonize quicker, but how can it help the electric companies decarbonize quicker? So with that, we appreciate the opportunity to comment and look forward to continuing to work productively with Commerce. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Nils. All right. Let's see. Next up, we have Jean Avery, and Jean will be followed by Diana Schooling and Noel Allen. Hi, Jean. Jean, you may need to unmute yourself. There we go.
Okay, can you hear me, Tom?
We can, yeah.
Great, great. My name is Jean Avery. I'm a resident of Vancouver. I want to thank the Department of Commerce for advancing an energy strategy that will guide our state toward a cleaner and more equitable future. My comment relates to the availability of jobs in an emerging clean energy economy. As I think of the various hearings I have attended, the environmental arguments against proposed projects seem convincing to me. Of course, everyone wants clean air and clean water, right? Yet the voices in opposition typically have another priority: jobs. Unfortunately, the merits of the proposals are often lost amid the persistent and understandable demand for jobs. I recently learned about the Climate Conservation Corps, an idea put forth by Governor Inslee. Patterned after the earlier CCC, this program could create jobs to install solar panels, retrofit buildings, restore public lands, and rebuild communities. The Climate Corps would also include apprenticeships, as described in section 7.5 of this draft document. If the Department of Commerce is able to accelerate the availability of clean energy jobs, please do so. I believe public support for a clean energy future will greatly increase once jobs become available. This sounds like a win-win. Clean energy jobs are good for workers and the climate. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean.
You're welcome.
All right, let's see. So next up we have Diana Schooling, followed by Noel Allen and Mark Hennon. And let me just check. Diana, I'm not seeing your name here, but if you raise your hand, we'll see that and I can call on you. All right. And then Noel Allen. Noel, I'm also not seeing you here, but if you are on, you can raise your hand. All right. And following Noel, we have Mark Hennon and then Janine Provizek. Let's see. Mark, I'm also not seeing your name here, but if you are with us and raise your hand, we can bring you in. And Janine Provizek, I'm also not seeing you with us. So if you are there, if any of the folks that I just mentioned are here, you can raise your hand and we'll call on you. It's Diana Schooling, Noel Allen, Mark Hennon, or Janine Provizek. Following Janine, we have Carolyn Logue, Brian Odell, and France Giddings. Carolyn, I am seeing you. Here we go. All right, Carolyn, you're with us. You just need to unmute.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Carolyn Logue. I'm actually here representing two groups of small business organizations that are involved in the energy sector, the Washington Air Conditioning Contractors Association and the Northwest Hearth Patio and Barbecue Association. Both groups have been watching this process and both have appreciate the opportunity to have these comments, but also have some concerns and want to emphasize that would like to see to make sure that in the strategy that there is some emphasis on continuing a pathway for buildings that includes gas, and for a number of reasons. First of all, we believe that the consumers in Washington state need the choice and alternatives to have natural gas available or gas available to them in their homes, particularly when it comes to finding the most efficient and cost-effective means for heating or cooling their homes or providing water into their homes. This is going to be really important because even though everybody wants to go towards full electrification and moving towards heat pumps, that may not be feasible in all parts of the state. And we need to be really cognizant of the fact that as we're looking at electrification across Washington state, there's going to be significant differences based on the region that somebody is in, particularly in what it's going to cost to do that. In addition, we want to keep gas in the equation because we think it is important, as one of the goals of the energy strategy is supposed to be, is to get to that decarbonization and to look at other alternative energy sources. And we think that if you don't keep gas in the equation to buildings, you're actually going to end up with an infrastructure that doesn't include gas piping, particularly going to new construction. And the problem with that is that if you then do that, do you lose the incentive to develop new technologies when it comes to renewable natural gas and hydrogen uses and other things that could run along that infrastructure that is currently being used by gas? And if you lose that because the retrofit might be too expensive, in a lot of situations. So there's huge concerns for both the organizations in terms of keeping that choice in there. Specifically, I want to address a couple of things that I don't think were addressed in terms of the strategy committee. First of all, the Northwest Hearth Patio and Barbecue Association deals every day with customers who are looking for alternative heating sources. It's good to talk about electrification, but there's a lot of concern about the reliability each year with electric products and the ability to get electricity to houses. We could get into a lot of concerns about just using solar and wind in general, but we do know we do have storms. And until you put every line underground in Washington state, you're going to have problems with trees coming down and with weather-related outages and people not having the ability to heat their houses. Every time there's a power outage, people come in looking for an alternative heat source. And there's a lot of concern that wood is not always going to be an option for people, particularly in Washington state where we have EPA non-attainment areas. We need to make sure we maintain the ability to have gas fireplaces and alternative heating sources using gas as an alternative for changing out old burning wood stoves in those non-attainment areas to help our air quality for everybody. This is something that we've proactively been working on. In the Washington Air Conditioning Contractors Association, we want to bring up a huge problem we see in terms of that could impact the timelines that are out here in terms of electrification. And that is the number of certified electricians that are actually in the state out there ready to work on these heat pumps and other things that everybody wants to do.
Carolyn, it's about time to start wrapping up.
Huge worker shortage in the number of certified electricians. And until the state actually makes a plan to figure out how to deal with that in the HVAC world and to actually look at what we can do to change that, we think that our timelines may actually be something that are designed to disrupt and not necessarily be successful. And we'd rather see them be successful. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Carolyn. All right. Let's see. It looks like we have a hand raised here, I think from one of the names that I mentioned earlier. So I'll, let's see. If you could just introduce yourself, let us know who you are. You may need to unmute here. Let's see. So this is the number ending in 9617. There we go.
Hi, this is Noelle Allen.
Great. Hi, Noelle.
Hi. I am in Seattle. I was told about this meeting from the League of Conservation Voters. I am a very concerned resident of this state. I don't think I need to really rehash what we all lived through in September with fires. And I would call on the state to really follow through with this energy strategy and get off of natural gas, get off of fossil fuels. I think we have a lot of good proposals with switching over to heat pumps. I think the technology is there. We have companies in Washington state who are creating solar panels. My husband and I just put those Washington state manufactured solar panels on our roof. And I think that just points to the fact that there is industry in the state that these things can be scaled up and we can create green jobs in the state. Also, I would also like to push forward on the issue of refrigerants and the super greenhouse gas emissions that are the direct result of refrigerants, specifically HFCs that are in a lot of our supermarkets. And I think that the state could very quickly target getting these supermarkets to switch over to a more climate-friendly refrigerants, because studies show that there are lots and lots of leaks from commercial supermarkets because they have such a vast number of pipes and so much refrigerants in those stores, and there's just a lot of leak, and those are super greenhouse gas emitters. So if we want to do something really quickly, we can target that. And then please just no more natural gas. We don't need to keep we just don't need to keep investing in those systems. Okay. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Noelle. All right. Let's see. Next up, we have Brian Odell. And after Brian, we have France Giddings and Grant Falco. And let's see, Brian Odell, I am not seeing your name here. If you are with us, maybe on the phone, if you can raise your hand, let us know. If you hit *9, that raises hands on phones. And Brian, we can come back to you if you raise your hand and join us. So why don't we go to France Giddings next. Hi, France, if you want to unmute yourself. Let's see, France, we have you here, but you're on mute. All right, France, I'll tell you what, why don't we come back to you? And let's see, next up, we have Grant Falco, and then we'll have Cynthia Mitchell and Jim Lazar. All right, Grant, if you want to unmute yourself.
Okay. Thank you for having me. My name is Grant Falco. I am an owner-operator of Falco's Fireplace and Barbecue. We are a fourth-generation family business located in Spokane, Washington. We have served the community for over 90 years. We have 34 awesome teammates and are still growing. We sell gas fireplaces, stoves, and inserts. Our yearly revenue is between 5 and 6 million, which 50% of that is gas related. I am in favor of clean energy and proven methods to do that. I joined our family business because I felt what we provided for the community was vital, and that's through zonal heating appliances, gas alternative heaters. You can lower the cost of heating, and you can also have the ability to have that appliance work when the power goes out. I'm here to ask you, the Washington State Energy Strategy Committee, to focus on a pathway for gas in the future so that we can have multiple clean choices to most effectively heat a home. Our business has been drastically affected already. A few examples. We have major builders in this area that we do work with, and we provide zonal heaters for gas fireplaces, appliances that zonally heat a room and lower the cost of energy by heating where people live. We have now major builders going from gas to electric and making that change outright because of the Washington Energy Code. Not that I'm opposed to that, I just think that the decisions are a little bit quick and there's not really another choice that's going to replace what we offer. The builders are also offering a more expensive home with less value in it for the consumer. Going to existing homes, because new construction is a small part of our business, majority of our business is in existing homes, alternative heat sources save energy on a daily basis. We install over 1,000 fireplaces in existing homes a year, and almost every time the sole purpose is to reduce the cost of their current energy, whether it be oil, whether it be whatever else that's costing them more, therefore maybe a little bit less efficient as well. We are removing that market by getting rid of these gas appliances. And the last thing is our low income community in and around our area really relies on zonal heating, gas appliances, alternative heat sources such as that to get by. And we're removing that by eliminating gas. We are for cleaner air, we are for consumers' choice, and we are for sustainable jobs in clean energy alternatives. We feel that keeping gas in the mix is vital to allow for the best transition into cleaner energy. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Grant. All right. Let's see, France, why don't we try you again? Are we able to unmute? There we go.
Okay, I'm good. Thank you. So I'm Franz Giddings, and I guess since so many people are saying who they represent, I'd like to say I'm representing all living beings and our children to come. My first request is that every tree that is removed is replaced. And in the area of equity, that community solar projects be strongly considered, because people might be able to afford a share in a community solar where they can't afford or don't live in a private residence to be able to put that entire thing up on their dwelling. In general, I would urge us to turn to electricity as much as possible, but the electricity needs to come not from a coal source, and not a big fan of natural gas either. Thank you.
Thank you, France. All right, let's see. Next up, we have Cynthia Mitchell, and then following Cynthia, we have Jim Lazar and Mary Patterson. Let's see. So Cynthia, I'm not seeing you on the list. If you're with us and raise your hand, we can bring you in. Oh, there we go. Great. Oh, let's see. That's not Cynthia. That's Mary. Sorry, Mary. We'll come back around to you in just a second. Let me go to Jim Lazar. All right. Hi, Jim.
All right. Well, that rejoining lag is a little longer than I expected.
Yeah, that took a minute there. Go ahead.
I had a career advising state agencies, facilities, and public interest groups on energy policy in this state. My comments deal partly with buildings and partly with transportation. Starting with buildings, page 68 talks about energy efficiency. Gas and electric utilities are required by law to acquire all cost-effective energy efficiency, but many do not even offer audits to identify those opportunities. The strategy needs to require all gas and electric utilities to inventory every building they serve, identify all cost-effective measures, and then publish the status of their progress towards acquisition of those measures. Also on page 68, there's some discussion of natural gas. The strategy should give natural gas, propane, and heating oil distributors maybe 3 years to develop a zero carbon IRP. If they fail, the State Building Code Council should be directed to remove those fuels as energy options for new buildings. Turning to transportation, page 45 talks about electric vehicles and roadway usage charge. The RUC, as proposed by the Transportation Commission, is hostile to our energy and climate goals. Their proposal is to charge all passenger vehicles the same price per mile for driving, the little electric Smart and the big F-350 pickup. Roadway costs are driven by vehicle width, vehicle weight, and miles traveled. A fuel tax tracks all three of these. This energy strategy must instruct the Transportation Commission to pursue changes that improve, not reduce, the efficiency and equity of transportation taxation. The strategy misses an important point. Currently, drivers of electric vehicles are double charged. First, like other vehicles, we pay an excise tax on our fuel, the state and local public utility excise taxes, 13% here in Olympia where I live. On top of this, electric vehicles also pay an annual registration fee, much higher than petrol and diesel vehicles. The strategy needs to address the double charging of electric vehicles by eliminating the extra registration fee and directing the existing electricity tax collected from them to the motor vehicle fund. So we're treated equitably with petrol vehicles. Finally, on page 46, the strategy addresses barriers to walking, cycling, and transit. Several municipalities have adopted multimodal level of service methods under the Growth Management Act. Most have not. The strategy needs to identify changes that are required to the Growth Management Act to clarify and assure that transportation impact fees collected by cities and counties can be used for non-motorized purposes. Thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to participate.
Thank you, Jim. All right, let's see. Next up, we have Mary Patterson, followed by Dean Fournier, and then Dwayne Johnlin. So, hi, Mary. I think you just need to unmute yourself. Oh, there we go.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you. My name is Mary Patterson. I live in Seattle. I want to echo, first off, the concern about natural gas, also known as methane, which NASA itself has said has to be given up like other fossil fuels if we are going to stay within a 2 degrees Celsius temperature increase. So I'm concerned about a just transition for people working in the many fields having to do with natural gas, but I echo those who have said we do need to move quickly away from natural gas as well as all fossil fuels. I'm here though to offer a comment on behalf of an organization I volunteer with, which is called Solutionary Rail. More information for anybody who's interested is at www.solutionaryrail.org. And there's a 3-minute video on that website that will help introduce the project. At Solutionary Rail, we see that railroads can help us achieve and exceed our 2030 goals here in Washington State, impacting the transportation sector primarily, but not solely. So we're asking the Department of Commerce to add railroad electrification into the draft before it's finalized, especially in the transportation section, but not only. Here are the main tenets of the Solutionary Rail Plan. First, to start with the corridors, the rail corridors that already exist, rather than build new corridors, because building new corridors, like for high-speed rail or bullet trains, will take at least 2 decades, well beyond 2030. Secondly, this means that Solutionary Rail recommends starting with higher speed rail rather than high-speed rail. Higher speed rail is faster than what we have now, but not as fast as what most people think of when they think about electrified rail. They think of high-speed rail or bullet trains. Higher speed rail has the advantage of being able to be built more quickly than high-speed rail because it can be built on our existing rail corridors. Also, higher speed rail should also be part of the energy strategy because it solves another problem, which is the problem of freight transportation, whereas high-speed rail is really mainly by far for passengers with little capacity for freight. Fourth tenet is that the energy efficiency of rail, electrified trucks, buses, and cars will be necessary for the first and last miles, transporting people and goods. But steel wheels on steel rail require approximately 1/3 of the energy that electric vehicles require. And with electric vehicles, there's the problem of production, recycling, and disposal of batteries that will be necessary on the scale, especially on the scale needed when we scale up with electric vehicles. So consider the violence done to people, land, and water in the extraction and disposal of materials for batteries. A further advantage of rail, it can be electrified by overhead power lines, avoiding an over-reliance on resource-intensive batteries. Finally, our railroads can help us achieve our goals in the other sectors as well, because the corridors, the rail corridors, could be used for a second set of power lines to transmit renewable energy in a statewide renewable energy grid.
Mary, it's about time to wrap up.
All right, my last point here, a revitalized electrified railroad will produce immediate benefits for workers in trackside communities, could become a new source of green family wage jobs. An electrified railroad will reduce the cost of highway congestion and wear and tear. And finally, rural and small town and tribal communities on the rail lines will experience new connectedness and opportunities. Thanks a lot for hearing me out.
Great. Thank you, Mary. All right. Next up, we have Dean Fournier, Dwayne Johnlin, and then Joseph Hiss. All right. Let's see, Dean Fournier. I'm not seeing you on. If you are on, maybe on by phone. If you raise your hand or hit *9, we'll be able to see you. And Dwayne Johnlin, I'm also not seeing you. So so same thing. If you want to raise your hand or hit *9 on the phone, we'll see you there. So why don't we go then to Joseph Hiss. Hi, Joseph. If you unmute yourself.
Good enough. Let's see. I guess I don't need to hide myself. I don't want to. Well, anyhow,
You can. We'd love to see you if you want to go on video.
Well, I don't know how yet, so I won't worry about it. In any case, I want to say that I'm very grateful to be able to be consulted. The first thing that I want to do is to say that just this morning I was working on supplementary charging stations for EVs, and I was wondering if Washington has any plans to, or why I should say Washington should consider helping to subsidize such stations. The other thing that I have to comment is on the slideshow that you presented earlier, it looked as if buildings were being given a free ride because of their energy requirements, and that somehow it was okay not to decrease the fossil fuels when it came to public buildings. And I can't understand that really. So those are the two comments that I had, but there's just so many more that made good sense to me. I think that the actually, Mr. Stinky, when he talked about the avoidance of war, I thought was about the best of all, because that would certainly provide an enormous economic benefit if we could get around that point. There was so many other things here that I do support. I would just like to say, be cautious when people come to you saying that they need stability, that they need predictability, that they need flexibility, that they need to have this mix of fuels, that they need choices. Some fuel choices are not good, and you're going to have to recognize that. So I think that those are the main things, but I'm learning so much. I don't have anywhere near the amount of time to reiterate everybody else's comments. Thank you very much for having me.
Great. Thank you, Joseph. Okay. Let's see. Next up, we have Francis Hall, and then Edward Hosak, and then Ted Lehman. Let's see, Francis Hall, I'm not seeing you on, but if you are on and want to let us know, you can raise your hand, or if you're on the phone, hit *9. And Edward Hosak, I'm also not seeing you on, but likewise, if you want to raise your hand or hit *9 on the phone. So why don't we go to Ted Lehman. Ted, looks like you're on. You just need to unmute. There we go.
All right. Thank you. My name is Ted Lehman, and I'm the Vice President of Sales and Regulatory Affairs at CMS Energy Advisors. We market natural gas, renewable natural gas, carbon offset credits, and provide large energy users in the state with purchasing strategies to reduce their greenhouse gas impacts and provide them regulatory advice and updates. We believe that to achieve Washington State's greenhouse gas reduction goals, state policymakers should be focused on policies designed to incentivize a portfolio of low to zero carbon energy solutions to leverage existing infrastructure by replacing fossil carbon with renewable carbon. Policymakers should seek to establish strong standards and incentives that are technology neutral and encourage market transformation to zero carbon alternatives. These solutions include the expansion of renewable natural gas infrastructure and market support to help independent RNG developers add more resources. The state should support policies that lead to renewable natural gas from Washington's abundant biomass resources in our forests, agriculture, and waste streams modeled after California and EU technology neutral policies. Our concern with this report's reliance on the electrification only pathway could be to disincentivize other renewable energy alternatives in Washington State, whether they're used in the transportation for vehicles or planes, replacement of bunker fuel with LNG, renewable natural gas, or the replacement of methane with hydrogen on our current natural gas pipeline system. These are real solutions that could impact Washington State's carbon footprint quickly. Today, if we rush out towards electrification, there's insufficient green baseload power to take over our natural gas grid's role in providing reliable energy, which could necessitate adding more natural gas cogen capacity to the resource mix to keep the lights on, let alone the massive cost and time necessary to build out our electric distribution system. We should be pursuing multiple paths towards a greener Washington State and let the best technology solution win. Thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate everybody's efforts.
Great, thank you, Ted. All right, let's see, next up we have Maggie Asplund, and then Robin Briggs, and then Janet Hedgepath. Let's see, so Maggie, I'm not seeing you in the list. Maggie Asplund, if you're on, you can raise your hand or hit *9 if you're on the phone. We'll be able to see that you are here. So why don't we go to Robin Briggs. Hi, Robin, if you just unmute yourself.
Hi. My name is Robin Briggs. I'm a member of the 43rd District Environmental Caucus, and I wanted to thank you all for the work that's gone into the energy strategy, which I think is a great working plan for how we can work together to address climate change. I do have a few suggestions. The emphasis for transit and freight by train, I think, is great, but we're going to need a plan for funding both transit and roads. I suggest moving to a vehicles per mile driven charge that is applied as a function of the driver's income or the car's value or possibly how much the car pollutes. We need to start charging people who drive the cost of driving so that there is more incentive to lower vehicle miles traveled. Second, I think it's critical to develop a plan for converting all buildings to electric. And that's something the state is really in a position to drive. The state should also allow cities to have stricter residential building codes, just as they can now for commercial. This can't wait. People are making investments now that will lock in emissions 20 years from now. We need to find ways to make this affordable for everyone. Lastly, the process is crucial, and regular review and transparency is crucial. The report recommends that it be updated more frequently than every 10 years. Yes. I recommend a 2-year cycle for updating the plan, and every year a report to the people about what progress has been made and what is anticipated in the next year. There could be a web page with reports on ongoing projects so that people can find all the climate-related work in one place. Further, this should be a priority that is carried into everything we do. That means budgeting for staff to do the work. It means keeping all of this in mind during rulemaking. It means raising revenue to fund programs. And it means carrying the conversation about changes to the people so we can see what's being done and understand why. In the end, it is the people who will be collectively making these decisions. So lastly, I just want to say it's not useful to approve this plan as good as it is and go back to business as usual. We need to approve the plan, use the plan, and make it clear to everyone what is going on and why. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robin. All right, next up we have Janet Hedgepath, then Deborah Hanig, And then Sandy Griffin, I'm sorry, Sarah Griffin. Let's see. Janet Hedgepath, I'm not seeing your name over here, but if you raise your hand or if you're on the phone, if you hit *9, we will bring you into the conversation. And Deborah Hanning, I'm also not seeing you here. So again, if you raise your hand or hit *9 on the phone. So why don't we go, let's see, Sarah Griffin. Let's see, Sarah, I am not seeing you. Oh, there you are. Thank you. Go ahead, Sarah.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Griffin, and I'm commenting on behalf of the Seattle Aquarium, which has a mission of inspiring conservation of our marine environment. The Seattle Aquarium strongly supports phasing out fossil fuels as rapidly as possible as a critical component of the work to achieve a clean and equitable economy. We urge the Department of Commerce to advance this bold plan. We would also like to see the energy strategy updated in the future to further integrate specific equity priorities and to ensure that there is no new fossil fuel infrastructure in Washington state. Given that offshore wind is included in some of the scenarios, we also wanted to note that it is critical to ensure that any offshore wind project effectively mitigates the risk of wildlife entanglement or strikes, chemical contamination, and conflicts with traditional or cultural uses. Please move this draft strategy forward as a solid foundation for the work so that action can begin right away. We can't lose any time in taking statewide action to reach our greenhouse gas emission goals and avoid the worst impacts of climate change, particularly on already overburdened communities. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Great, thank you, Sarah. All right, next up we have Arvia Morris, who will be followed by Michael Ruby and then Catherine Chudy. Let's see, Arvia. There we go. Hi, Arvia.
Hi, hi. My name is Arvia Morris. I'm with the 43rd District Environmental Caucus and have been a environmental advocate for a long time. And thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'd like to echo the concern of really knowing how much all of this is going to cost. I think it's a great plan, but we really need to be able to implement it. And to implement it, we know we need to know how much it's all going to cost. And so I hope that the Department of Commerce can come up with those numbers so that the policymakers can have those numbers to work with. And I'd like to share my personal story, which is that we live in a house with a furnace blew out in the winter, and we did get a heat pump system, and we're really glad we have added value because now in the summer it's heating and cooling all in one unit, and we can put in clean air filters ourselves. So that if we have bad air pollution days, we can feel safe in our house using the filters that you can just buy at the hardware store or otherwise procure and be ready for those bad pollution days. So I really feel like this technology is excellent. It's using a lot less energy. And in fact, shockingly, Seattle, the demand for electricity in Seattle overall, I heard recently, has actually gone down, even with all the building that's gone on. So, and it's because of the efficiency of the buildings that are being built and the kinds of things you can do with weatherization and those huge improvements. So there is actually a lot more room in the electricity sector to take on things like transportation and take on more commercial and residential buildings. So I'm optimistic about that plan and enthusiastic about it. I would like to say that I really hope that the social cost of carbon is taken into the accounting that is done every year to determine the costs of the plan, because the more we dig into creating greenhouse gases, it's more and more costly for us to dig out. And so the social cost of carbon needs to be part of the cost benefit analysis of this plan as we move into the transition. I'm also a big fan of conventional rail, and I hope that we won't be making new rail corridors. I think we can do a lot with the corridors we have and improve them. And I do believe that we need to switch the way we bond and pay for our roads. It needs to change. It should not be tied to the fossil fuel industry. It should be tied to the kinds of vehicles on the roads. And we should be using vehicle miles traveled so that electric cars are on the same footing as other types of cars in terms of the road maintenance. And it isn't an arbitrary registration fee that is not really fair. And I think that just generally, I want to thank everybody for the great plan, and looking forward to seeing how it gets implemented. That's the really key thing. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Avia. All right, let's see. Next up, we have Michael Ruby, and then Catherine Chudy, and then Richard Wesley. Hi, Michael. If you unmute, there you go.
Yes, I have a pretty lousy microphone. Do I need to speak louder than I am?
You're coming through just fine.
Very good. I'm Michael Ruby from Seattle. I congratulate the advisory committee, the Department of Commerce, and their consultants for pulling together an excellent document in this state energy strategy. It is clear and comprehensive, and there's always a but, isn't there? It is only a starting place. Next, we need to specify what are the major issues that still need to be resolved and who needs to be involved in those discussions. We need to specify who will lead the effort. We need to know there will be neighbors who will bear real burdens to achieve these goals and will see only small benefits from their successes. We must face that squarely and come up with ways to soften the impact. We need to create detailed implementation plans for each of the action items and detailed task lists for each implementation plan. And we need to post all of that on a dashboard on the Department of Commerce website. We need transparency and accountability for getting to where we need to be by the dates we all know are crucial to success. We need one person in either the governor's office or the Department of Commerce who is personally responsible to shepherding all these action items and ensuring that when someone seems to be going slower than planned, ask, how can I help? Let me add one small item where one beneficial result was not listed in your report. In figures 16 and 17, on page 35, you list the air quality benefits of decarbonization. You did not list the significant reduction in summer days when we will have fewer excess ground level ozone concentrations. As we reduce the hydrocarbon use in gasoline and diesel fuels and the reductions in NOx emissions, as you have noted, the production in ozone will decrease. With rising summer temperatures, business as usual will mean an increase in violations in air quality standards. A prediction of how decarbonization will prevent this can be calculated and should be one of the benefits you claim and list. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. All right, let's see. Next up, we have Catherine Chudy, and then Richard Wesley, and then Peter Godlewski. So, Catherine, we'll bring you in. Let's see, Catherine, we may have, looks like maybe we lost you. So let's see, why don't we go to Richard Wesley. Richard, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Richard Wesley, and I live in Seattle, and I run a sort of small consulting firm called Effervescence Labs. And first of all, I'd like to thank the committee for all the hard work they've put in over the past year. This is the most important public works action that we can be taking at this moment, and the solutions are not easy to find. I'd like to comment on two topics: geothermal regulatory review and state energy independence. First, geothermal regulatory review. The past 2 years have seen the development and commercial deployment of closed-loop geothermal power plants. These plants have no seismic risk, no surface water consumption, and no groundwater contamination risk. Moreover, they do not require hard-to-find geologic formations and can thus be deployed almost everywhere with little surface footprint in timeframes measured in months by skilled union labor from the drilling and piping industries. Geothermal electrical generation can provide valuable grid services, including dispatch, black start, voltage and frequency regulation, and energy storage. Although the recently published GeoVision report from the Department of Energy does not mention closed-loop systems, it does mention the regulatory burden on new geothermal plants, specifically calling out the multiple steps required for approval on federal lands. Given the environmental advantages and speed of deployment of closed-loop systems, I would encourage the state to examine and streamline the approval process for such plants on state, utility, and private land. Unlike most Western states, Washington has no geothermal generation plants. We should figure out why and fix that. Second, state energy independence. The modeling study shows that by 2050, the state will be a net importer of energy. Energy is wealth, and it could be economically advantageous to develop more in-state generating capacity to make up the difference. In addition, the historical difficulties in expanding interties, even to neighboring states like Idaho, and the current deplorable state of the California grid, suggest that there are practical reasons to aim for energy independence. The limited interconnect scenario suggests that if we cannot increase interstate electrical ties, we will have to deploy offshore wind, which is more expensive than onshore wind and may negatively impact tourism and wildlife around the Salish Sea. Small footprint generating technologies such as high temperature fission and closed loop geothermal that are compatible with intermittent renewables offer parallel generation growth pathways and would expand the need for diverse skilled union labor. We should consider encouraging sufficient build out to achieve energy independence as a synergistic side effect of deep decarbonization. Thank you for your time and for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Richard. Okay. Let's see. Catherine, I think we passed each other in the electronic sphere. So why don't you go ahead?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. And
Can
if you just want to.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. And if you just want to introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Catherine Chetty, and I'm a resident of Vancouver, Washington, and representing myself. Thank you for the opportunity to add my voice along with those who support a strong, equitable, clean energy economy in our state. I understand the pressing need to create good jobs, while at the same time, I believe equity must be the underlying driver to how a clean energy economy evolves. All aspects of the plan must ensure that the equity lens is in full focus and operational. I'm a long-term resident of Vancouver. I have worked for years as a volunteer activist opposing fossil fuel terminal threats to the health, safety, and environmental viability of our region. I have advocated with our port and city council to develop strong policies addressing the accelerating impacts of catastrophic climate change. I have urged our Clark PUD to focus on conservation, efficiency, and renewables, and to phase out reliance on the River Road gas plant. Here in Southwest Washington, we suffered through the worst air quality in the country for 10 days in September as wildfires raged around us. I realize that health impacts from catastrophic climate change will do nothing but worsen over time, especially for our most vulnerable residents. We are out of time with lives at stake. The key to reversing this disastrous course is taking action now across state agencies to actually achieve statewide greenhouse gas reduction goals. I appreciate that Washington State is undertaking this course of action. The fossil fuel industries persuade the public that their profit interests are essential to our comfort and convenience. The fracked gas industry cleverly strategizes to greenwash fossil gas, deliberately and intentionally disguising the fact that investment in fracked gas development will slow our transition to a clean energy economy. It makes sense to undertake the challenges of closing the door on fossil fuel business that we already know carries risk of significant health and safety harms to our community, especially business that carries environmental justice impacts that we must not incur going forward. I realize that the energy strategy is still a work in progress. I have no doubt that the fossil fuel industry, especially fossil gas, will be doing all it can to weaken it. Please do not allow this to happen. You are the guardians of the public trust on this, and I urge you to resist any call to weaken the strategy in ways that would enhance fossil fuel industry profiteering while undermining and betraying the public interest for a safe and healthy future going forward. Please be sure the energy strategy includes prioritized, updated, and integrated equity processes, no new fossil fuel build-outs, phasing out fracked gas and fossil fuels, starting with the most polluted and impacted frontline communities first, and finally establishing a specific and detailed implementation plan that fully realizes both the spirit and the letter of our state's greenhouse gas emission targets and our 100% clean electricity law. Thank you for your time and thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you, Catherine. All right, next up we have Peter Godlewski, then Donna Albert, and then Virginia Lohr. All right, Peter.
All right, thank you very much for the opportunity to provide public comment this afternoon. My name is Peter Godlewski. I represent the Association of Washington Business. The Association of Washington Business has over 7,000 individual members in Washington State. We are submitting additional written comments, but did want to take the opportunity to provide a few high-level comments of our top concerns. Our members do take the threat of climate change seriously, and we believe the solution merits a serious discussion of the risks and trade-offs of how to lower the state's emissions. One of the most paramount concerns to our members is ensuring that utilities provide reliable and affordable energy for our members. California's rolling blackouts this summer are a reminder that we cannot take a functioning grid for granted, and that decisions to decarbonize too aggressively and without sufficient backup plans can lead to catastrophe. This document makes many assumptions that numerous factors will magically align in order to allow an aggressive transition to a net zero future for the state, while still providing adequate energy needs. We would like to know just how exactly the 2 high voltage transmission lines and the offshore solar, wind, and solar installations called for by this document will be permitted, sited, funded, and built in less than 10 years. This is very concerning when the state was unable to permit even one of these so-called transformational facilities in 2 years. We believe the pathway laid out by the SES is too fast and does not provide enough safeguards for the Washington businesses or for consumers. Natural gas performs a vital role in providing energy for the state, and its continued use is key for the successful implementation of the Clean Energy Transformation Act. The SES even recognizes the value of low-cost natural gas, saying it expects consumers to pay $900 more in energy costs each year under this plan. The only way for consumers to realize any savings is to go out and buy a new electric vehicle to replace their current gasoline-powered vehicle. While some of the state may be able to afford this, the low-income communities identified as a particular focus of this strategy are unlikely to be able to do so, and therefore will be stuck with those higher costs. Another problematic element is the emphasis on retrofitting residential homes with heat pumps instead of natural gas furnaces. This ignores the fact that heat pump performance drops considerably as the temperature approaches freezing, something that it regularly does in the eastern part of the state. This would further increase the economic burden of the decarbonization pathway laid out by the strategy. Finally, the addition of the low carbon fuel standard will further drive up costs for all consumers, for providing precious little funding for the transformative transformation projects this document further requires for the math to work out. When looking at the economic impact of their own 5-county LCFS, the Puget Sound Clean Air Authority's own economic analysis found that their proposed LCFS would result in a drop-wide state GDP in every economic scenario they looked at. It's very unlikely that a statewide LCFS would impose a proportionally larger hit to the statewide economy that has left many Washingtonians out of work as a result of COVID-19, and they act as an additional anchor in any recovery. AWB and our members support and are eager to take part in an earnest discussion of ways to responsibly reduce the state's emissions while protecting the jobs and economic opportunity that benefit so many Washingtonians. This draft strategy does not contribute that much to this discussion. The strategy hinges on outcomes of dozens of assumptions across multiple energy and industries playing out in perfect synchronization. And its success relies on undeveloped advances in alternative fuels and energy and storage, and depends on the massive change in consumer sentiment, behavior, and purchasing patterns. We are mindful of the challenge ahead of us and the need for action. However, as one of the lowest emitting states in the nation, we have the time and space to enable a much more responsible pathway towards a lower emissions future that is built on a firmer foundation than what this document lays out. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comment.
Thank you, Peter. Let's see. Next up, we have Donna Albert, and then Virginia Lohr, and then Eric Strid. Let's see. Donna? Let's see, Donna, it looks like we can hear you.
Hi, I'm Donna Albert, Montesano, Washington. I'm a professional civil engineer with a master's in civil engineering and 26 years experience managing the design, construction, and energy retrofit of public buildings in the state of Washington. I'm speaking as a private citizen and not speaking on behalf of my employer. Thanks for the opportunity to comment on this excellent energy strategy document. The energy strategy clearly states that most of the CO2 emissions from buildings in our state come from burning of natural gas and other fossil fuels for heating, hot water, and cooking. The strategies proposed in the built environment section will decarbonize our buildings. Do not soften or compromise this section. With reliable and affordable zero carbon electricity only a few years away, our buildings can become zero carbon emissions just by going all electric. Any burning from methane gas, whether labeled fossil or renewable, will unnecessarily add CO2 to the air and dangerous pollutants in people's homes. Give low-income households new efficient heat pumps, electric ranges, hot water heaters and dryers, and update their electrical boxes to make quick progress in getting methane gas out of homes. One big thing missing from the strategy is acknowledgement and analysis of the biophysical limits and impacts on nature and food supply when biofuels are implemented on a large scale. This strategy is the place and time to address biophysical limits. There are no existing laws, environmental or otherwise, which will do this. Climate change is teaching us that we exist within nature and cannot survive outside of it. In addition to climate change, we are in several environmental emergencies now, one of which is massive extinction of insects and plants, which threaten the very web of life we unknowingly depend on for air, water, food, and a livable climate, mostly due to how we use our land. The strategy relies on biofuels and syngas as a significant part of our future energy mix. Washington State should be a model for other states. Biofuels cannot be used on this scale globally without enormous impacts to ecosystem services, nature, and our food supply. And biofuels cannot be low carbon emissions with current and near-term technology. We made this mistake with corn ethanol. We made this mistake with palm oil, both of which we still use for energy on large scale in spite of terrible environmental damage. We have not learned from our mistakes. I will give detailed comments on actual biofuel emissions and impacts when I review the appendices, which are not yet available. I'm also concerned about reliance on natural gas and biofuel in new CHP, distributed energy generation, or reliability projects, which would commit us to decades of CO2 emissions. I will submit written comments. Thank you again for a truly great strategy document. Don't weaken it. Don't burn things for heat and energy. Keep those CO2 molecules out of the air. Thanks.
Thank you, Donna. All right, let's see. Next up, we have Virginia Lohr, and then Eric Strid, and then Jeff Berner.
Hello, I'm Virginia Lohr, I'm a member of the Vashon Climate Action Group. I fully support the intent of this document and the goals of our state to equitably and effectively reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. I have a recommendation to improve the consistency of this document with the state's goals. On page 12 of the draft document, under number 3, Transition of the Fossil Natural Gas Industry, the end of the first paragraph says, quote, "Fossil natural gas has a lower emissions rate per unit of energy than either coal or petroleum." The paragraph concludes by saying, quote, "As a result, in some contexts, natural gas has been identified as a clean source of energy." These are misleading statements. Current research shows that when upstream emissions or leakages from fossil gas extraction and distribution are considered, it can be as bad or worse than other fossil fuels. And while some sources may claim that natural gas is a clean source of energy, this is a false statement. While the next paragraph of that section does go on to say that natural gas must be eliminated to meet the state's emission limits, the state's 2021 energy strategy document should not even imply that natural gas might be a bridge fuel. It is not. I recommend that these two inaccurate sentences simply be eliminated from the document. They are completely unnecessary to the point of this section, and they actually undermine it. I also want to strongly support Mary Patterson's statements about incorporating solutionary rail into the document. Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia. All right, next up we have Eric Strid, who will be followed by Jeff Berner and Justin Pino. Eric, go ahead.
Thank you. I represent our children. First, I applaud this effort toward a comprehensive long-term energy plan. I'm a retired CEO who grew a semiconductor equipment company through decades of technology disruptions. The biggest missing piece in this strategy is accelerating the technology disruption that is underway in electric vehicles. Technology disruptions go exponential, sort of like COVID going exponential, except that when EVs go exponential, it's all good, unless you're an oil company. Transportation is the largest greenhouse gas emission sector and the largest toxic emission source, but it's also by far the largest energy expenditure for Washingtonians. Of the $26 billion that Washington spent on energy in 2018, 15.5 billion or 2.5% of the state GDP was for transportation fuels, the large majority of that for light vehicles. That's over $2,000 per vehicle annually for fuel. Electrifying all those vehicles would cut the 15.5 billion and spend about 5 billion annually for more electricity. Thus, the oil companies' lost revenue will fund our grid build-out, while also saving us over $10 billion a year. And the faster the EV adoptions, the more money Washington saves. EV fuel costs about 1/3 of a gasoline vehicle, and maintenance costs are much lower. Mid-market electric cars will be cheaper to purchase than gas diesel cars by around 2025. And electric pickups will be cheaper before 2030. As far as I can tell, the EER modeling in this report grossly underestimates EV growth because their cost numbers are outdated. The EER study also uses the EIA Annual Energy Outlook Forecast. For those unfamiliar with EIA, their historical data is great, but their track record on forecasts is particularly laughable. For example, for years they predicted that solar would plateau and coal be flat through 2050. Of course, solar has instead continued to rise and coal continues to drop. As a result, this report misrepresents the lower emissions from EV adoptions due to business as usual forces. In particular, every automaker and truck maker in the world is now racing to develop electric vehicles, competing for their survival in the new market. So beware of the modeling numbers in this report. Washington policy could emulate the only country that's on track to reduce vehicle emissions 45% by 2030. That's Norway. which uses various carrots and big fees to equalize the costs of electric versus emitting vehicles. The buyer who brings a new emitting vehicle into the fleet is the party responsible for locking in the lifetime emissions of that infrastructure. When there are zero emission options in that vehicle class, that buyer should be charged for the lifetime emissions of a new vehicle. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. All right, next up we have Jeff Berner and then Justin Pino and then Richard Sargent. Hi, Jeff, go ahead.
My name is Jeff Berner. I'm a member of the 43rd District Environmental Caucus. I would like to focus my testimony today on the recommendations for adoption of electric vehicles as part of the state's energy strategy. It is noted in section 3.1.1, implications for state energy policy, the importance of adoption of electric vehicles in meeting our statutory greenhouse gas reduction goals. Specifically, transportation electrification is key to cost-effectively decarbonize Washington's economy. The sooner the state can electrify vehicles, the greater the avoided investments in more expensive clean fuels, including their associated infrastructure and feedstocks. The draft 2021 energy strategy contains specific recommendations for adoption of electric vehicles in setting specific targets for adoption in section 2.1, in planning for infrastructure in section 2.2, and accelerating the market for electric vehicles in section 2.3. In terms of prioritizing action within the Department of Commerce for meeting our intermediate 2030 and longer term 2050 greenhouse gas goals, Commerce should prioritize working within the executive and legislative branches of government to develop a publicly available integrated implementation plan with specific actions, metrics, and timelines for electric vehicles with a particular focus on equity. With regards to equity, I would request the strategy considering the following. 1, alternatives to the gas tax for road maintenance. A significant barrier to legislative action is the perception that electric vehicles will not pay their fair share in taxes for road maintenance. Consequently, the replacement of the gas tax should be a near-term, high-priority policy area to enable adoption of electric vehicles. A road usage charge is one option mentioned specifically in section 1.3 of the strategy. How this usage charge is calculated and how it is to be applied has a significant impact to achieving equitable adoption of electric vehicles. A usage charge that is applied as part of the state's vehicle registration fee may work against EV adoption and equity, as this would require a single payment from lower income residents instead of paying the tax incrementally. This observation is not currently reflected in the strategy. It is specifically requested that the 2021 energy strategy acknowledge the importance of replacing the gas tax as a key prerequisite for other policy actions. The electrification scenario assumes 50% of new vehicles are electric as soon as 2027, which implies the importance of this particular area. In addition, adoption of an alternative funding mechanism to the gas tax would demonstrate Washington State's continued leadership for the nation in developing environmental public policy. 2, EV warranty or insurance programs for used vehicles should be incorporated in the strategy, as low-income residents will be primarily purchasing used vehicles. Such a warranty program could address the high cost of battery replacement, which could serve to increase EV adoption and minimize what could be the high costs of repair for low-income residents.
Jeff, it's about time to start wrapping up.
Okay, 3, car buybacks for older polluting vehicles can work to improve equity for lower income Washington State residents. And lastly, the 2021 energy strategy should also take into consideration recommendations for developing performance standards for electric vehicle battery recycling in the interest of promoting sustainability. Thank you for the opportunity to comment upon this strategy.
Thank you, Jeff. Next, we have Justin Pino, Richard Sargent, and then Mason Rolfe. Hi, Justin, go ahead. Oh, Justin, you're on mute. Justin, it looks like you're still on mute. If you click on the little microphone button down there at the bottom of your screen, that should unmute you. All right. Well, I'll tell you what, Justin, why don't, if you want to jump in, why don't you go ahead and raise your hand in the next round. Why don't we go to Richard Sargent? Let's see. Oh, it looks like we might have lost Richard. But Richard, if you're on and are on the phone or have a different name, you can go ahead and raise your hand and we'll be able to call on you. So why don't we then go to Mason Rolfe? Hi, Mason, go ahead.
Hi there, thanks for taking our comments today. My name is Mason Rolfe. I work with Olympia Community Solar. We are a nonprofit community solar developer and administrator. And I'm specifically commenting today on section F3. It's the last section of the plan titled Facilitate Equitable Deployment of Renewable Generation Resources and Grid Services. Within this section of the plan on page 134, it states that net metering laws limit meter aggregation and do not have specific requirements for virtual net metering. And that limits access for multifamily housing projects and other forms of housing scenarios from participating in solar energy. And our organization, we support the inclusion of this language, and we affirm that meter aggregation and the lack of virtual net metering create significant barriers for multifamily housing, for renters, for multi-metered office buildings, and for low-income communities. Now, even with that language in there, there aren't clear actions within that section to identify those significant barriers to solar adoption. And so we'd like to encourage you to include more actions in section F3, including that the state should ensure the state should ensure accessibility for DERs sited on multifamily buildings by expanding net metering laws to include more meter aggregation, and that the state should expand opportunities for community ownership of DERs by implementing a community solar program that includes virtual net metering. Thanks for taking these comments, and thank you for your hard work on the plan. That's all.
Thank you, Mason. All right, next up we have Matthew Solak, and then Jessica Koski and Scott Ongley. Go ahead, Matthew. It looks like you're on mute. You just need to unmute yourself. Let's see, Matthew. It looks like you are still on mute. Oh, there we go. All right.
Yeah, hey, sorry. Thanks, Tom. I guess I didn't know if I hit the raise hand or not. So that might have been a little inadvertent, but I guess since I'm unmuted at this point, I'll make just a brief comment. I'm Matt Solak. I represent the Pacific Propane Gas Association, and we represent a non-regulated gas provider in regulated gas providers in the state of Washington. Our members consist of small family-owned businesses that have been operating in the state of Washington for decades. And obviously we appreciate the Department of Commerce effort to tackle this important issue. But from our perspective, we are concerned with numerous provisions in the state energy plan. Specifically, there's a lot of obviously comment on natural gas, and we understand that. But as a small sector of the energy sector, I think we're overall very concerned in regards to what the impact would have to our members and to our customers, as there's very little conversation and direction on the customers that we serve. Again, we are providing home heating and home cooking, hot water use for mostly rural Washingtonians. And there are some real cost concerns that we have regarding some of the long-term strategy recommendations that this plan calls for, in that it has from our perspective, a very urban and suburban direction. The infrastructure costs that a lot of our customers see can be quite substantial, since it's often rural and low and moderate income families who are using our product, not in kind of the high residential areas. So we do have some concerns with that. We do have some concerns regarding the promotion of electric heat pumps for specifically our customer base that tends to be in the colder climates, often in the mountains or in more rural areas, in which efficiency of electric heat pumps diminishes as the temperatures get colder. So we have some concerns regarding that. And I would also just like to, make a note to the department is, I think we've all, obviously the energy providers have talked about efforts to decarbonize their fuel. Propane's no different. We do have renewable propane that we do use in the Oregon Low Carbon Fuel Standard. We have additional products that we are trying to bring into the market that have very low or negative carbon intensity scores. And our concern with the push for electrification of everything is that there's very little incentive in the state energy strategy as proposed, because it really doesn't show a marketplace for current energy providers in Washington. So, we do believe that, in efforts to decarbonize the fuel, and but a part of that from our industry, of course, is having a market in the long run. So those are just some of the concerns, and I appreciate the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Matthew. All right, next up we have Scott Ongley and then Elliot Weinstein. Let's see, Scott, I'll bring you in. All right, Scott, go ahead. You just need to unmute yourself. Let's see, Scott.
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
Sorry about that. I was clicking the microphone button didn't work. Okay.
Oh, there we can hear you just fine.
All right. Okay, thank you. My name is Scott Onley. I live in Southwest Washington. I run a third generation fireplace and stove business with a revenue of $5 million, of which $3 million comes directly from natural gas product sales. We employ 17 people. I am also the president of the Northwest HPBA, which is an association that represents the fireplace and stove and barbecue industries, the manufacturers, the distributors, retail stores throughout Washington state. As we all work together to reduce Washington state's carbon, I asked the group to look at Washington state for what it is. Washington state, from east to west, is geographically and climate affected very differently. The need for an alternative energy choice, such as natural gas, is greatly needed going forward to ensure clean, low-cost carbon means for a backup heat source for both low-income and regular residential and rural homes. When electric power outages occur, and they will occur, just as they have in the past, these outages have lasted beyond 10 days with temperatures in the teens. Ice storms and windstorms will not stop happening no matter what this group does. Mother Nature tends to do what she wants when she wants. And when these outages occur, and if homes are 100% electrical, these homes will have no heat source. Natural gas has provided that optional heat source to either be a zonal heat source or a whole home heat source through natural gas products that do work during power outages. This is a means of keeping a family safe and warm until the electricity can come on. It's just something that seems to get overlooked a lot during these times where we all want to go electrical as much as we can, but there is definitely a need, and every homeowner, every citizen of Washington State has the right to have a choice. And it's so important to at least keep the gas lines open, keep the gas lines run to the homes, and when the times are needed, it can be used effectively and cleanly. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. All right, let's see. Next up, we have Elliot Weinstein.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Okay, great. My name is Elliot Weinstein. I live in Olympia, Washington. I am testifying as an individual today. As we know, transportation is a major cause of deteriorating air quality and toxic road runoff in our state. Therefore, I advocate that the state's energy strategy and the rules implementing it focus on behavior change priorities around land use and transportation. 2, prioritize vehicle miles traveled goals and incorporate these across the state. You should also pass a clean fuel standard, which is badly needed. Moving on, in addition, all new buildings should be zero carbon by 2027 and prioritize energy efficiency and building retrofits for existing buildings. The state energy strategy must create just transition planning tools and investments to grow low carbon industries, including addressing high consumption sources, electrifying appropriate industries, and deploying appropriate clean technology. Finally, I support the statements of Mary Patterson and Virginia Lohr. Thank you for considering my comments.
Thank you, Elliot. All right. Well, let's see. At this point, we are at the end of the list of people who signed up. There are some people who signed up who weren't on as we went by your names. So if any folks signed up and would like to make a statement but haven't yet been able to do so, I'd invite you to raise your hand, and you can use the little raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen. And I would also invite anybody else who hasn't signed up but would like to give a statement today to raise your hand as well, and we'll be able to call on you. So I'll give folks just a minute or so to think about whether you'd like to make a statement. All righty. Well, it looks like we don't have anybody else lining up for a statement at this point. I thank everybody that that chose to participate today to listen, as well as those who have spoken over the course of the afternoon. We really appreciate the time, appreciate the interest, and appreciate the input. We're going to be resuming this session at 6 o'clock tonight for folks that weren't able to join during the day, and to provide an evening time for people to join and to listen and to provide statements. For anybody that's on right now that may have missed some of the introductory material that included an overview of the strategy, we'll be repeating that at 6 o'clock tonight. So if you want to be able to catch that or want to listen again, I'd invite you to come back at 6 o'clock. It'll be this same Zoom link and call-in information at 6 o'clock, and all of that information is up on the Washington State Department of Commerce Energy Strategy website if people want to check in on that or share the information with friends or colleagues. So with that, I'll thank everybody for joining in today, and for some of you, may see you again at 6 o'clock tonight.